Hey everyone, welcome to our small footprint. I think this is Sunday and it is a kitchen day for Sunday, so I'm just going to share a few bits and pieces. I also potted up some plants and shared that as well, so enjoy watching and I will see you again in the next day or so. Thanks guys for watching. Alrighty, so starting out the day I had to get this sweet potato that I'd cooked sorted. So I cooked it all up and then stuck it in the fridge because I didn't have time the rest of the day to do anything with it. So I had a few things planned and the rest of it was going in the freezer for use for basically the same things but at a later date so that I didn't have to do them all at once. One of the first things I made was a sweet potato cake. I've done some Googling a bunch of different sweet potato recipes and have just been trying a few of them to see which ones we like best. The brownie is definitely very well received by the kids, so I made one of them yesterday, and today I thought I'd make just a plain cake because I thought that might be nice as well. A lot of the recipes, because they have sweet potato in them, are like healthy recipes, healthy in quotation marks there, which means that they try to avoid adding certain things, or they're vegan or whatever else. This cake recipe didn't have any eggs in it, which I really like eggs in my cake, but I decided to give it a go, and I always try and do the recipe as written the first time before I alter it. So the flavour of this cake was really nice. It tasted much like a tea cake, like a nice moist morning tea cake. It was quite nice, but it was a little bit dense and gluggy, especially at the bottom of it, and I think that was because of the lack of egg. So it uses oil as its like fat, I suppose, instead of eggs, and it had some apple cider vinegar in there to help with lift and things like that, but everyone liked it, but it wasn't quite what I was after, but it was tasty. So it had the sweet potato, it had coconut cream, which I watered down a little bit because it asked for a non-dairy milk, some olive oil, which you could use coconut oil instead. I just used olive oil because it was easier to measure out because it was liquid rather than solid, some apple cider vinegar, a bit of sugar, a bit of flour, and that sort of thing, and it just all got mixed up in the Thermomix until it was blended, and then I put it all in this tray to bake. So it looked too much batter for a square cake, but it might have lifted a little bit better if it was in the square, but it seemed like it was going to be too much, so I put it in this rectangle and it seemed to work out fine. It lifted somewhat, but yeah, it wasn't exactly what I was after, but it turned out fine. There is some spiced sweet potato breads that I really want to try as well, with some molasses and cinnamon and stuff like that, so I'll have to give them a go over time as well to use up this sweet potato. But anyway, I got that on the barbecue to try for today. The other thing I needed to make was some more gnocchi. Now I did make gnocchi for dinner last night, I think it was, but it all got eaten. I was hoping to be able to put some in the freezer, but that was not to be. So I made another batch today in the hopes of getting some in the freezer. So I found out the ratios that work for me, and I like 2 kilos of sweet potato with 800 grams of plain flour. Now this is very wet, the dough, so when you mix it together, I use a wooden spoon to start with, and then I use my hands to squeeze it through. I probably should have used the KitchenAid, except the bowl was dirty because it was really hard on my hands doing this. It took me quite a while to get it done. But mix it through so that all the flour is mixed into the sweet potato, and it looks sort of like a batter almost rather than a dough. I don't like when I take it to a dough consistency. It tends to be too chewy, and it's not our preferred consistency, so I definitely like it more as this really wet consistency. So I mixed all that up to be able to use, and put that aside while I had to get the cake out. So I got the cake out and I cut it. So as you can see, it's got this like bottom piece that's a little bit more dense than everything else, and the top has lifted a little bit. I think if I mixed egg through it, it would have been a little bit more evenly fluffy rather than no egg, but it was tasty. The kids enjoyed it. Darryl's had it with his coffee for a couple of times, and so everyone's happy to eat it, so it worked out fine. The fact that I'm cooking on a barbecue could be part of it too, the temperature may not have been regulated correctly enough for it to rise, and that's the problem with the barbecue and baked goods. It sometimes makes things difficult. I went back to the gnocchi. So the dough is very wet, as I said. So what I do is I use a spoon to scoop it out, and I use plenty of flour on my board, and I mix a bit of flour into each spoonful as I go. So rather than adding flour in bulk to the dough, I add a little bit more to the spoonfuls as I spoon them out to use. I find that this works better to keep it still really moist but handleable. So I add a bit more flour into the dough as I'm doing it, but then I also put a fair bit of flour on the mat as I'm rolling it. So you want to make sure that there's plenty of flour to stop it sticking from your hands, and anytime it starts sticking, I just sprinkle a bit more flour. Now, the benefit of this dough being so wet is that all this flour that you're adding isn't going to be too much. Like if you had have made the dough stiffer and were still adding all this flour while you were handling it, then you're going to be coming up to too much flour, and it's just not going to be as nice, or not going to be as nice for our tastes. I'm sure there's many different personal preferences of tastes of the texture of gnocchi, but for us, this is how we like it. So I add plenty of flour onto the tray as I'm doing the dough mat as I'm rolling it to make it more handleable, and then I just cut it into little pillow shapes. I don't roll it, I don't do it particularly even, I don't create the shapes, I just cut it into the little pillow shapes and put it on a tray. So all my gnocchi is all different shapes, all different sizes. It doesn't have any fancy little ridging in it, but no one cares. Everyone really likes it. I did put some semolina on the silicone when I was placing the cut gnocchi on it, in the hopes that it wouldn't stick too badly to the silicone, but I am intending to flash freeze these anyway, so theoretically it shouldn't stick too bad. So I managed to get 3 full trays, and there was a bit of a half tray which Darryl had for dinner. And so I got these 3 full trays into the freezer to flash freeze, and I will put them in bags in the morning, and then we will try cooking it from frozen. It should theoretically be perfectly fine. Gnocchi basically is a pasta, realistically, so I'm hoping that it'll all turn out fine. We'll give it a go anyway, and I'll let you know when I do cook it off, but that's in the freezer for now. One of the other jobs that I had to do was chunk up the pork. So Darryl did some rind over potatoes for me the other day, and we smoked half the pork that day for the meals, and I still had half the pork left in the fridge. So I cut it into smaller pieces so that it'll fit into the grinder on the KitchenAid. So I sliced it into slightly smaller pieces for that purpose, and then I marinated it. So I did all my normal. I didn't measure this. This mince is going to be turned into sausage and potato soup, or zuppa toscana kind of base that I'm going to can. So it needs to be fairly heavily seasoned for soup base. It's just the way it is. It needs to be quite significantly seasoned for that. So all I did was add some salt and garlic powder. I sort of weighed in that it was sort of 2 kilos-ish or 3 kilos of meat, so I did around about the 30 grams of salt, and then added garlic in a similar sort of a fashion. I just did it by eye with the scales to assist me a little bit. So I did garlic, I did smoked paprika, I added some basil and some thyme. I didn't have any Italian seasoning, which is normally what you use in something like a zuppa toscana, so I just used similar flavors in what I already had. And then I added a small jelly jar of cowboy candy to it as well, which isn't particularly authentic, is it? But we like the flavor. So I mixed that in, and then I mixed it really well, massaged all the spices into the meat as much as possible so that it was all well covered, and put that aside in the fridge for a night, and tomorrow I will mince that up. So that will be used to can some soup tomorrow. Hey everyone, end of the day, so I'm a bit frazzled, but I thought I would show you what I'm doing to finish my day off today. I've had plenty of time in the kitchen, which I'll share as well, but this is the end of Sunday, and I bought myself some of these green tea plants. So they're cuttings from Camellia Sinensis. I think it's got an extra N there. I think it's Sinensis. So they're cuttings from the Camellia Sinensis tree. So whatever you want to call it. So these are green tea plants, which means that once I get them established, I can harvest the leaves to make green tea, or I can process them. There's specific ways and specific harvesting ways of getting black tea versus green tea, but it all comes from the same plant, which I was fascinated to discover. So that's something that I'm going to look into. So I bought myself 10 of these. They were inexpensive because they're just cuttings, and they came, but they're only in like a peat perlite mix. So I can't leave them in this. So I'm going to pot them up into pots like I did with my berries and stuff, because they're going where the chicken pen is, and the chicken pen hasn't been moved yet, and we're still in that whole process. So I'm going to pop these up into some bigger pots so that they can last for the however long it takes us to get to the chicken pen finishing, so that I can plant them in that section out there. So I thought I'd show you what I'm doing with these and get them all potted up. So my hothouse is a mess. I've said it before that we're going to be changing this hothouse. So I haven't done much with it because the plan is to alter it. So these little pots are tiny, so I could pot them up into something just sort of this size probably, which would probably be fine for a period of time, but then it depends on how long they're going to sit in these pots, and I just don't know. So I do have these pots as well, which are quite large. Probably overkill, and I don't know if I've got enough soil here to fill 10 of them. So I might just put them in the little round ones for the moment, which is enough to give them some soil and allow me to water them more efficiently, and then I will pot them up further if it turns out that I need to at a later date, I think. So I should have 10 of these little pots here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I'm going to fill these up, and I've got a mix of my Active Go potting soil along with some of this cocoa peat and perlite, because I don't want it to be too heavy to transfer them into. So I'm going to fill these pots up with that. Alright, there's 5 to start with. Now, let's see how they come out of the pot here. I know this angle isn't real great, you're not getting a whole lot, but I haven't got stuff set up here. So this is what they look like, and they've got some nice root structure with just that perlite mix. So all I'm going to do is, these pots are only half full. Can you see this? Yeah. These hot pots are only half full, so I'm just going to dig down in the middle and place it in there like that, and then top up the top with the potting soil like that, and that should be enough to keep them going for however long it takes me to get them sorted. So I'm just going to do that with all of them. So there you go, 10 of the Camellia Sinensis potted up. I'm going to take them back inside because they've been living inside for the last few days, and we're going to have a few cold nights, so I don't want to shock them. So now that they're in new pots, I'm going to give them water, and then I'm going to take them back inside to acclimate for a bit, bring them outside during the day maybe for a few days until we get them sorted and happy. But that's it, 10 of those. It's a very exciting idea to be able to grow our own tea, so I thought I'd bring you along.